Okay, welcome everyone to the Louisville Review's 45th anniversary reading. I'm Sena Naslund, editor of the Louisville Review Literary Magazine. Back in 1976, University of Louisville undergraduate students, Bonnie Cherry and Tom Willett, came to me and said, "We're seeing so much good writing, we should have a magazine." And I said, yes, and it should be an import-export machine, and we should have people from all over the country send us their work, and we got to send some of our work to them. They were much in favor of this, and thus the Louisville Review was born at the University of Louisville. Later on, it was housed at Spalding University, and now the Louisville Review is an independent, nonprofit publication. We've gone through a lot of big changes, and we have so many people to thank for their amazing support through the years, through donations, through their time and talent, and also purchases of subscriptions and books. We have a book arm of the Louisville Review called Fleur-de-lis Press. The people who are published in Fleur-de-lis Press are people who have published already in the Louisville Review, but have not published a book. So I remember from my own start how very difficult that first book was to get published. And after that, things went much more smoothly. So we cover the magazine, which comes out twice a year, and also when we can, the Fleur-de-lis Press, which happens to be named for my mother, Flora Lee Sims Jeter, who was a wonderful proofreader many years ago. So I want to give a huge thanks to the Kentucky Arts Council, the state arts agency, which provides American Rescue Plan funds to our publication with federal funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. We welcome sponsors of all sorts as we go forward. I do want to pause a moment to bring your attention to our wonderful cover of the Louisville Review this time. I'm particularly proud of it. I'll give you a closer up look of this image. This is a painting by Corey Newmeyer, who works with Pyro Gallery here in Louisville. And the title of the painting is A Sunday Morning. I especially like that. I always think of Virginia Woolf, who saw the Grafton Gallery exhibit of modern art. And after she had done that, she said it completely changed the way that she wrote. It's wonderful that the arts are all related to each other and can inspire each other in many different ways. And we're going to try to feature art on our covers in the future. Well, tonight is a celebration of the wonderful poems and stories in our anniversary issue, TLR number 90. I wish we could have invited all of our contributors to this meeting, but we will give you a nice taste of poetry, fiction, and also creative nonfiction. We're starting off with our editor, Frederick Smock, who's a guest editor here for this special anniversary issue, and he'll introduce the poets whose work are featured in TLR number 90. Fred is a professor at Bellarmine University here in Louisville, and he served as Kentucky's Poet Laureate from 2017 to 18. He's published in such journals as the Southern Review, Hudson Review, Iowa Review, and many others. So without further ado, I'll introduce Fred and I'll welcome Fred, and he will welcome a number of our readers. You're on, Fred.
Thank you, Sena. And thank you for asking me to do this. It's been a real pleasure to read the submissions and to work with Amy and Flora. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm glad to welcome three of our poets, all of whom are former students of mine at Bellarmine. First up is Maria Tori. Maria observes the world with the eye and ear of a trained naturalist. She celebrates nature, but also does not ignore the dark side of things. Nature is beautiful, but it can also be cruel, as we know. She's also published in Poetry East magazine, published at DePaul University in Chicago. So Maria, you're on deck. Would you read your poem for us?
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. So The poem that I have in the Louisville Review this year is Your House a Room, and it's a short poem, and it unusually, most of my poems always include something in regard to nature, which, as Fred just mentioned, but this one is mostly just a snapshot of times when we might feel stagnant and alone. So this is Your House a Room. There are times when you may sit awake some hour of the night and realize yourself sitting there alone with only lamplight and shadows with you in the room. It will be so stark and clear that your apartment is really just a home, a room in a house, with 4 other rooms and 4 other lives, occasionally coughing, fucking, and yelling or playing loud music. The dust will have settled on the surfaces of your things, going nowhere, just as you are. Life will seem smaller and more impossible. Light will fade so that there's just enough for darkness to exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I love that final image in that poem. Light will fade so that there is just enough for darkness to exist. That's a really delicate thing, so thank you. Our next poet is Chelsie Taylor. Chelsie graduated from Bellarmine a few years ago. I lose track of time, so I don't know how long it's been really, Chelsie, since I've seen you last. Chelsie and her husband raise bees and plant pollinator habitats. I don't really know what that is, but it sounds good in central Kentucky. Go ahead.
It's very nice. It usually just ends up with a lot of lovely flowers everywhere. So it's
okay. Well,
it's
that's very sweet. Her work, like Maria's, reminds me of the poet Mary Oliver, but in wholly original ways. Chelsie has also been published in Poetry East magazine, and she's going to read her poem, Moths in Sage. Chelsie?
This poem, like most of my others, is usually just a small snapshot and is really observational. So without any other lead up, this is Moths in Sage. I bent to pick up a cigarette butt, and it fluttered away. It was, after all, not something discarded, but a moth with a flat black head and dusty-looking wings. It made me think of Dad smoking on the porch in the almost dark, watching the night creatures land all along his row of Russian sage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsie.
Thank
was
you.
lovely. That was lovely. And I love the surprise of the Russian sage in the last line. I hadn't seen that coming. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next poet is John James. John has written an elegiac poem for my father playing a guitar that is both touching and detailed. John's first collection, The Milk Hours, was selected by Henri Cole for the Max Ritvo Prize and was published by Milkweed Editions. John is a PhD candidate at University of California, Berkeley. So John, welcome.
Thank you so much, Fred. I wanted to say thanks to Amy and to Sena and also to you, Fred, for all of your work on the magazine and for putting the reading together. And thanks too to the previous readers. It was really wonderful to hear your poems. So I'll just read this piece. Poem for my father playing a guitar. Somewhere in the tangled threadwork of these pages, there's a photo of my father in a blue button-up shirt, leaning over the nickel strings of his guitar. He's just come home from the chemical plant where the spiders make their nests, and their webs, spun in factory dark, become schematics by which to read the scarlet hourglasses of their bellies. My mother and I sing blindly beside him. I remember the wood was black and the neck stained a deep brown, faded into silver cross marks over which his fingers danced. Then there are the days he's lying in bed, and because we went skiing in the mountains, and for weeks after he was sick, because in the hospital he slept for days, and because we'd brought him tulips, I thought he had pneumonia. Now that his image is faded, and I recall him only as a blurred outline drifting in the midst of great crowds, I do not envy him in the least. All he left behind is the color of his shirt, shoes pressed with the imprint of his feet. a Browning representation of himself leaning over a guitar, and a song I think he's singing, which I know I'll never hear. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was beautiful. Thank you again. And we'll wrap up the poetry section. I'll read a few poems by Regina Derieva, a Russian poet who was a very interesting case. Regina was born in Russia, Jewish. She and her husband immigrated to Israel. However, along the way, she converted to Catholicism. And Israel's right of return applies only to people who still consider themselves Jewish. And because Regina felt that becoming a Catholic was the only important decision she'd ever made in her life, she wouldn't go back on that. So they were denied entry into Israel. They settled in Palestine for a number of years. Regina eventually settled, and her husband eventually settled in Sweden, where her widower, Alexander, still lives. Regina died a few years ago. We met when she found an essay of mine on Thomas Merton and translated it into Russian. Although Regina was not fluent in English, and her husband only somewhat so. And I don't know Russian. So when we got to work on her poems, they got a Russian to English dictionary and transliterated each page and then sent it to me and asked me to turn it into poetry. And so it was an iffy proposition. We went back and forth until everyone agreed on the versions. And I actually got to do a reading with Regina in New York City at a Russian cultural center on the Lower East Side, where Pushkin's grandson kept wandering in and out. And there was a very intense group of Russian men there in the audience with a lot of questions. And one of the questions for me was, who was the first Russian poet that you really read or understood? And I had to be honest and say Yevgeny Yevtushenko, who they considered to be an apologist for Stalin. But that was the first book that I read. So there was some grumbling, but we got through it. And Regina read her poems in Russian, and I read them in English translations. So this is a couple of poems by Regina. This one is called Composition on a Given Theme. I wish I could read them for you in Russian, but I cannot. So Composition on a Given Theme. Dip a finger in the fire and create the universe. Someone comes from the school and says, that costs you nothing. So write me a composition. Your annual grade will depend on it. But I have my finger in fire, which can go out, can cool down. And after that will never be the universe, but only this poor composition on the theme, creativity and its application in life. Her poem, Scientific Zoo, cites Lenin. We were forced to read works by V.I. Lenin, leader of scientific communism. Many people abroad were jealous of the fact that we read him in the original and free of charge. Is it not the same in a zoo? Many are jealous of wolves and other beasts, believing that they do not have to think about sustenance in the near future. Her poem, Secondhand, reads, buying secondhand clothes is easy and convenient. You are not responsible for them since they already had an owner who did with them what he wanted. These clothes always go out of fashion. But here's an article whose price is a bargain, having a previous smell and a previous mood. This clothing in essence has died, but has not turned to tatters, having been renewed, having been filled by others, having been forced to live. As new immigrants are forced to live, a very old Syrian woman looking after their children. And lastly, Regina's poem, Useless Occupation. A lot of her poems, of course, had to do with boundaries and checkpoints, lines on a map. So Useless Occupation. I do not have enough good impressions to begin to collect them. To collect useless occupation. Might as well collect clouds. However, why not? This cloud, for example, I just met on the road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Gold and azure of the pre-Raphaelites. It got stuck at the checkpoint. Thank you, and thank you to the poets and to Flora and Sena and Amy and everyone involved. A pleasure.
Thank you so much, Fred. That was a wonderful experience. All of the poems take us to such places and such inner lives that we feel we need. And I really appreciate your sharing that work that comes from a faraway place and in a long ago time. Thank you so much, Fred, for all that you do as a writer and as a teacher. I'm really moved by the effort it must have taken to create those poems when you did not know Russian. We believe in it in any case.
Thank you, Sena.
I want to introduce Flora K. Schildknecht, who will in turn introduce other people who have contributed to this issue. Flora is the Associate Editor of the Louisville Review, and she's the author of a short story collection titled Megaphonum, and her short fiction has appeared in various journals. She's been nominated twice for a Pushcart Prize. Flora teaches creative writing and literature at Bellarmine University, where she served as a part-time instructor for the English department since 2016. She received an MFA from Spalding University, where she studied fiction and dramatic writing, and she's currently a doctoral student in comparative humanities at the University of Louisville. Flora is going to introduce Jonathan Weinert for the next presentation. And I want to say a special thanks to Jonathan myself, because he assembles our pages. He makes it possible for the Louisville Review to exist as a physical object. He often designs the cover, no matter what the work is that we send to him. So we have a special appreciation for Jonathan Weinert and his many talents. Now, Flora.
I'll just do this as gracefully as possible. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Fred, and thank you, Sena and Amy. I'd like to welcome Jonathan Weinert now. Jonathan is the author of 3 books of poems, A Slow Green Sleep, winner of the Saturnalia Book Editors Prize, and a personal favorite of mine. In the Mode of Disappearance, winner of the Night Boat Poetry Prize, and 13 Small Apostrophes, a chapbook. He is co-editor with Kevin Proofer of Until Everything is Continuous Again, American Poets, on the recent work of W.S. Merwin. I Couldn't Say No is an excerpt from his recently completed memoir, 5 Minutes in Heaven. And as you know, Jonathan also serves as TLR's cover designer and will be our next guest poetry editor for our upcoming issue number 91. Please welcome Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Flora. It's really a pleasure to be here with everybody celebrating this anniversary. It's really an honor to be associated with the Louisville Review and the Fleur-de-Lis Press. And I want to especially congratulate Sena for keeping the Louisville Review alive and kicking for 45 years. That's no small thing. As Flora said, I'm going to be reading it's really an excerpt from my memoir, 5 Minutes in Heaven, which really focuses on my high school years in the 1970s, growing up in a suburb of Boston. And it's really about how I made my way despite a home life troubled by ambiguous abuse and psychosis. And this particular scene that I'm going to read focuses on a particularly difficult moment with my difficult mother. A humid midsummer weeknight, 1973. My younger brother, who was only 7, was already asleep. Dad was reading the day's Boston Globe in the big living room chair with his feet up on a hassock, or holding the paper up and pretending to read. Mom was in the dining room, translating articles on Russian aviation for the Air Force, recent issues of Pravda and other organs of the Soviet state piled everywhere. As a 14-year-old, I was too young to have started smoking weed, and I was never really interested in drinking. Reality, on the other hand, was often too much for me to take, so I determined to get drunk and see what it might do for me. My parents weren't big drinkers, to say the least, so there were always open bottles of liquor in the cabinet above the kitchen stove. I listened at my bedroom door to make sure that the coast was clear, then sneaked downstairs. I opened the liquor cabinet doors as quietly as possible, selected a half-finished bottle of cheap Smirnoff vodka that had been sitting in there for God knows how long, grabbed an orange plastic cup from the dish drain, and poured myself a large measure. I replaced the vodka bottle, silently closed the cabinet doors, tiptoed back up to my room, cup in hand, and chugged. The vodka tasted awful and it burned, but I choked it down. Then I looked around, uncertain as to what would happen next. I rinsed out the plastic cup in the upstairs bathroom and made my way back downstairs as the alcohol started taking effect. Suddenly, I found myself overwhelmed by an invasion of affectionate feeling. I didn't know where it came from, but I felt filled up to the brim with love, filled up and spilling over. Mom had moved to the kitchen table where she was reading the previous Sunday's Parade magazine. For a second, I thought that she had discovered my raid on the liquor cabinet and was giving me the silent treatment, but she seemed oblivious and didn't look up. A flood of compassion washed over me. I felt a fierce and deeply rooted love for this woman who often behaved so unkindly toward me. I stood in the kitchen doorway and tried to take her in, really take her in and see her. If only I could say the right words. Maybe I could break through the hard feelings. Maybe we could make a real connection, Mom and I, and express our true feelings to one another, even if it was only for a moment. Mom, I began, taking care not to slur my words. Mom, I just feel like I need to tell you, for no specific reason, but just because I really want you to know. I just want you to know that I really love you. I moved myself so much with the power of my own emotions that actual tears started in the corners of my eyes. Mom sighed, but continued staring down at the pages in front of her. I assumed that she was having an experience similar to mine. Having you, Mom said finally, her eyes on her magazine, her right hand turning the pages. Having you was the worst mistake I ever made in my life. My vision tunneled, the blood roared in my ears, and I teetered. I was so shocked, so taken aback, you could have knocked me over with a dish towel. I backed silently out of the kitchen and made my way upstairs in a sort of waking dream. I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed. I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. So it was true. Mom had no use for me. As much as this revelation anguished me, I also found it perversely validating. At least my perceptions were accurate. I was objectionable, but I wasn't crazy. Mom wasn't crazy either, although it might have been convenient to think so. She was sad, and her sadness made her mean, and I was unwise to expect anything from her except aggravation and grief. I'd like to be able to say that I had enough self-respect, enough of a sense of my own worth as a human being to have shaken off the terrible barb that Mom had stuck in me, but it was not so. I told myself over and over that what Mom had said to me couldn't be true, but I believed it anyway. I couldn't say no. I spent the rest of my time at home until the day after my 18th birthday, and in some ways the rest of my life up until now, attempting to turn myself into a different person. Maybe I could change myself or change the world or change the relationship between myself and the world. I didn't know what that change would be nor how I could bring it about, but I determined right then and there to do everything I could to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that beautiful and devastating reading. It's a moment that gripped me the first time I read that piece, and it grips me again every time that I encounter it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to extend also a thank you to Nathan Gower, who could not be here with us this evening, for serving as guest fiction editor on this special issue of TLR, and for reading and selecting fiction along with me and Sena and Amy. Nathan holds an MFA in fiction writing from Spalding University and a PhD in humanities with an emphasis in aesthetics and creativity from the University of Louisville. His work has been published in various journals, and he currently serves as Associate Professor of English at Campbellsville University. So a big shout out and thank you to Nathan Gower for your work in this special issue. I'd now like to turn things back over to Amy Foos Kapoor, our managing editor, and give a little introduction for her as well. Amy, in addition to being our managing editor, is a writer, producer, and event coordinator for the annual summer reading series Voice and Vision, presented by Spalding University's Sena Jeter Naslund Karen Mann School of Writing, the Louisville Review, and 21C Museum Hotel, right here in Louisville, Kentucky. Amy earned an MFA from Spalding University, where she studied writing for children and young adults. She has 2 picture books forthcoming from LeBeau Books in the fall. Please welcome Amy once again.
Thank you so much, Flora, for that very kind introduction. Can you hear me? Okay.
I believe so.
Okay. 45 years in publication is a huge milestone. So congratulations to everyone involved, especially Sena and Flora. And I'm so glad that this magazine is going forward. And thanks to everyone for all your support and work. And I'm very honored to be a part of this very special journey going forward, and that we will have many, many more years of publishing great literary work in the Louisville Review. So up next, we're going to hear from 4 fiction writers who were featured in our special anniversary issue, TLR number 90. And up first, we have Vicki Derderian. She is a fiction writer living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Her work has been published in the Michigan Quarterly Review, Independence Boulevard, Ararat, and the London Reader. Vicki will read from her short story titled Veil. Vicki?
Thanks to Amy, and congratulations to the Louisville Review. It's an honor to be here this evening. Veil. In this house, my grandmother's house, the smell of perspiration and melted butter. In this house, percolating coffee hiccups arrhythmically, and my grandmother uses a sawed-off broomstick to roll phyllo dough, so white and satiny as a wedding dress. A tear in the dough, a batch thrown out. Her right wrist jangles with charms, silver silhouettes of her grandchildren. Though the charms are identical, we are not. My cousins have gold woven in their hair, green eyes, noses that are pugs, buttons. I am a dark brown girl with black frizz hair. My grandmother prefers my cousins, pretty children of her son, number 1 son, my uncle, who she dotes on. My mother is not her favorite. Who doesn't want to be their mother's favorite? In this house, my grandmother's house, coffee and pahlava, bitter and sweet. Cups and saucers clatter and spoons stir sugar, sips and hums. My mother slumps at the table, aggrieved. She has left another job, told never to set foot again. Things have been going badly for her, and she needs help. The worst kind of help, help from her family. They hate me, you know, she insists. They really do. When you are 10 years old, you don't question any of this. You listen. You listen to your mother when she tells you she doesn't need anyone's help. You believe her when she says she is tough, resilient. You don't wonder if your mother is reliable or not. Of course she is reliable. In this house, my grandmother's house, my cousins pull Taki's tail. The cat yowls. My turn, your turn, no, my turn, my. Hide and seek with no rules. Meg, Yerguk, Yerek, 1, 2, 3. Go, my mother tells me, go play. I am not going anywhere. Is love the tether? Is fear? I crawl under the big mahogany table where my family's feet and legs line the perimeter. Flesh-colored stockings and terry scuffs, my grandmother. Brown loafers, one with a penny, one missing, my uncle. Smooth, meaty calves and worn black pumps, my mother. I nest under her chair, holding onto a claw foot, arched like Taki, wanting to purr. Anahid, my uncle speaks in Armenian, beginning every sentence with my mother's name. Anahid, Anahid, Anahid. In this house, a language of secrets. Her foot bounces up and down, up and down. I will not topple. I will not make a sound. Anahid, Anahid, Anahid. Esheg, my mother cries out, asshole, a curse. I feel a sharp kick hit my soft belly, and another, 3 blind kicks, but I stay where I am. She finds me under the table. Go, my mother wails, now. She locks me in a room that reeks of stale face powder, my grandmother's bosom. In this room, a narrow iron bed covered in crochet that I will sleep in that night and every other night for the next 8 years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vicki, for
Thanks.
that powerful and beautiful reading.
Thank you.
And up next, we have C.B. Heinemann. C.B. is a graduate of the University of Maryland. His stories have appeared in Berkeley Review, Sheraton Review, Florida English, and many others. He's also written for the Washington Post, Boston Globe, and Philadelphia Inquirer. CB will read from his short story titled An Alpine Hostel. CB?
Hello. Where are we? Can you see
Welcome.
here?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, well, congratulations, Louisville Review, for a wonderful job for 45 years. Well, thanks very much for this opportunity to read from my little story on Alpine Hostel. Not as idyllic as it sounds. When I landed a summer job at a Swiss youth hostel set in a high alpine valley, I never imagined that I would end up burying the bodies of several guests in the back under a pile of lichen-coated rocks. I just graduated from college and wanted to spend as much time abroad as possible before facing reality of getting a real job. After weeks of traveling through Europe, I found myself in a place where I thought I could be happy for the rest of my life. Ubertal was a hamlet tucked like a tooth filling high in the Berner Oberland mountain range, complete with dizzying views, a small lake, and wooden chalets. With only one tiny road that corkscrewed up from a remote valley below, Ubertal didn't get many visitors other than hikers on the Berner Oberland Circle, a challenging week-long hiking trail. I spent a night at the youth hostel just outside the village at the foot of a high granite mountain. I met the hostel manager, a guy from Croatia who spent a year in the States at the same university a former girlfriend of mine attended. Danny was in his 30s, spoke perfect English, and had been working in Swiss spas and hostels for years. He was a tall, athletic guy with glasses and a crew cut who didn't talk much, but when he did, he had a gentle voice laced with good humor. We sat up late in his office drinking wine and talking about Switzerland. He told me that he also spent time bumming around before getting a job with the Swiss Hostel Federation. When he mentioned that he needed help at the hostel, I jumped on it without hesitation. My main jobs consisted of cleaning the bathrooms and showers, washing the dishes, and helping to make the beds. I usually had long breaks when I could go on hikes or just hang around. Danny did the cooking, kept track of paperwork, and once or twice a week, he would drive down his VW van to the town of Interlaken to bring up supplies. Hikers showed up at all hours, usually cranky, footsore, and exhausted, and we provided them with hot meals, showers, and a clean bed. Danny was always the magnanimous host, ready to welcome everyone with a mug of coffee or tea. He spoke some French and pretty good German, which was absolutely necessary, while I struggled to learn enough to get by. Late one night, he woke me in my room and handed me a flashlight. "We've had some trouble here tonight, and I'll need your help." I was still halfway in my dream. "Well, what's going on?" "We've got to go out and be quiet. We don't want to wake anyone." "Out," I pulled on my jeans. "What's the problem?" "We've got to get rid of something bad." "Did the septic tank overflow, or worse, much worse? Somebody died." I stared up into Danny's face, which was barely illuminated by his flashlight. "Died? What are you frigging talking about? Should we call an ambulance?" "Too late for that. He's dead." I felt a shock ripple through my system as I pulled on my sweater. "Oh crap, how did this happen?" "We've gotten into something over our heads. We've got to bury the body." "What we need to do is call the cops." I stopped as horror poured through my system like hot poison. Someone died here? I can't believe it. Are you sure? Oh, I'm sure. I could detect a tremble in Danny's usually calm voice. A couple of Russian guys came in late and they were arguing even as I let them in. They didn't have hiking gear or backpacks or anything. I can understand a little Russian and knew right away we were in trouble. I went into the kitchen to get them some coffee and I heard them really going at it. By the time I came out to try to calm things down, one of the guys was dead and the other was slumped over the table. I'm sorry, the other guy was gone. The other was slumped over the table, dead. There's no blood, so it might be cyanide. Those Russians have a lot of ways to kill each other. Murder? Cyanide? Danny, we have to call the cops, man. You don't get it. I could see his face harden. If any of these Russians find out about this, we'll be dead in no time. We've got to get rid of this guy and make it like this never happened. Are you crazy? Well, no, you don't understand. He turned to check that the door was locked and lowered his voice to a whisper. I had no idea the Russian mafia was in Switzerland, probably just to stash their money in the banks, but they're here. We've got to do this right now. He gave me a look I'd never seen before. This reminds me of when my family was killed years ago. My God, your family killed? Yeah, don't ask. Let's do this quick. I was too groggy, disoriented, and frightened to argue further. Somehow I decided to do as Danny said and think about it later. The stars washed across the sky in a brilliant display, and the air was cold as iron. Danny led me outside to a heap of plastic behind the building. He's in here. I'll take the arms if you'll take the legs. There's really a dead guy in this bag? What is it, a body bag? You'd be surprised at this is what the Swiss Hostel Federation wants us to have on hand, just in case. Let's go quickly and be very quiet. I could never adequately describe my horror and revulsion when I felt those heavy, lifeless legs through the plastic and heave them up, but I somehow managed to steel myself and do the job. Terror and adrenaline can work wonders, especially when aided by the threat of being murdered. Before I realized it, we had carried the unfortunate man deep into the woods. I could hear the splash of a nearby waterfall. And there you have it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, CB, for that delightful and thrilling story that just has tension at every turn as things go from bad to worse and worse. We enjoyed that so much. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce Nadeem Zaman. Nadeem is the author of the novel In the Time of the Others, long listed for the 2019 DSC Prize in South Asian Literature, and the story collection Up in the Main House and Other Stories. His fiction has appeared in Singapore Unbound, Roanoke Review, the Wilderness House Literary Journal, Copperfield Review, Cha, an Asian literary journal, Dhaka Tribune, Dhaka Daily Star, Bengal Lights, 94 Creations, and other journals. His novel, The Inheritors, is forthcoming in 2022. Welcome, Nadeem.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for this great honor. And I also have the double honor of sharing the same year of birth as TLR. So it's really fantastic being in this company. So this is the Holy Visit. He was coming to Chicago for 3 days at the end of the month, and Minnie Azad volunteered to host him. Volunteer was not the right word. Minnie had prayed for the opportunity. It was here and she was grabbing it. Minnie, you know how much he wants, right? Said Taslima Ahsan. Taslima was head of the committee overseeing arrangements for the visit, although in light of certain developments of late, was reconsidering the position. And Minnie, those nasty, awful things that have been going around about him, I don't know what to think. It will not be enough for me to just see him from a distance with a crowd around me, Minnie said, or at someone's house I don't like. And you know who's saying nasty, awful things? Nasty, awful people. I can't believe you pay such nonsense any mind. I'm only saying, oh God, Minnie, calm down. I don't pay them any mind. Me and Farouk, we send him money too. But 20,000? Minnie is out of our reach. Who is telling you to reach? Taslima looked around at the three other women in her living room. Did I say I want help? Minnie said. You all do your part, I'll do mine. Once the date is set, let me know. That man is a shady character not of today, said Mustafa Azad. His whole family is. Only other nut jobs and cranks fall at their feet. Including me, right? Minnie held the teacup halfway to her mouth and stared at her husband. You know, sometimes it's enough to just let things be. People's beliefs are their beliefs. Minnie's eyes settled on the framed pictures on the sideboard. Okay, said Mustafa. Not everything has to take the brunt of your ridicule, Minnie said. He's going to come here and he's going to connect me to my son. Minnie, darling, don't do that. I will go to the bank tomorrow. Minnie got up with her cup of tea and took Mustafa's empty one from the coffee table. Don't go into the accounts and do any funny business tonight. The bank, funny business, said Mustafa. Yes, no free lunch, right? That's what you say, isn't it? Why should he not get paid like anyone else for what he does? Mustafa watched her leave, then slowly made his way to the kitchen. How much? No amount is too much. It's my money too. That man will come here. Minnie dear, it's my money too, Minnie said with finality. Half my life I worked and saved. I will spend what is mine as I wish. On previous trips, Pir Baba visited all the major cities except Chicago. Minnie spoke with envy with friends and relatives in New York and Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and wondered that he had even made a stop at a godforsaken place like Lincoln, Nebraska. They have Bangladeshis there, she said. Mustafa had laughed. It's where INS used to process immigration applications. Of course they're there. Idiots probably thought it would jump them ahead in the queue. Work had kept Minnie from planning a trip to one of the other cities to coincide with Pir Baba's visit, but after Ashraf died and she retired, meeting the holy man became a quest. But no, she'd maintained, I will not go to Bangladesh to do it. I don't want those bad memories cursing it. Minnie's father, 2 brothers, and an uncle had been killed by the Pakistan Army during the War of Liberation in 1971. Mustafa too had lost family members, but he still felt a deeper connection to Bangladesh than Minnie, though he had only gone back a handful of times since they migrated to the US almost 50 years ago. Once Ashraf was in high school and the 2 older boys in and out of college and onto jobs, marriage, and family, Minnie began softening and about Bangladesh, largely because of Ashraf. He wanted to visit. Mother and son made plans, and Ashraf started saving money. He ran a web design business alongside his job that had come out of an internship with a tech company the summer before senior year of high school. Minnie told him he didn't have to worry about the money, but Ashraf kept on saving. By the time of his death, he'd saved close to $5,000, and his death sent Minnie back to her reservations about Bangladesh. What does the country have to do with it? Mustafa had said. It's cursed. Minnie returned to her former stance. It took one family from me and wants to take the other. Minnie, said Mustafa, setting down a glass of milk on her nightstand. Just listen to me, please. $20,000. It's your money too, yes, but it's money that took years of both of our lives to save. What would we do if something happened? Go back to work at our age? You are such a drama queen, said Minnie, taking a sip of milk. Just say what you want to say. You know what it is, said Mustafa. This man is not your direct connection to God. Then that's what you believe. It's true. You believe things that I don't belittle. You thought George Bush was a good man, and then look what he did to Muslims for 100 years in this country. Minnie, please think about this, said Mustafa. I'm begging you. I have, said Minnie. My mind is set. What about the allegations about him? Those women should be slapped. They didn't get what they wanted, so they flinged mud at a good man's reputation. No, Minnie, you don't believe that. I believe what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadeem.
My pleasure.
So much for that wonderful reading. It's lovely to see you again. Where are you at this moment?
I am in Southern Maryland, where I teach. I'm in Southern Maryland, where I teach at the St. Mary's College of Maryland English Department.
Well,
Pleasure seeing you again. It's been a long minute.
It's wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for sending your work to the Louisville Review and for joining us in this celebration.
My great honor. Thank you.
Next, I'm going to introduce Patricia Foster. She's the author of All the Lost Girls, which won a PEN Award, Just Beneath My Skin, essays, and also the author of Girl from Soldier Creek, which got the SFA Novel Award. She's the editor of 4 anthologies, most recently, Understanding the Essay with Jeff Porter. She also received a Pushcart Prize, a Clarence Kaysen Award, Dean Scholar Award, a Yaddo Fellowship, and other awards. Patricia has been a professor in the MFA program in nonfiction at the University of Iowa for over 23 years. I also spent time at the University of Iowa many years ago. Patricia has taught writing in France, Australia, Italy, the Czech Republic, and Spain. Please welcome in your hearts, Patricia Foster.
Okay, I'm going to read from my story. We can't save them all, can we? It's a story of mother and daughter boundaries, you might say, and choices made and not made. It also takes place in 1984. This is important because it's during the anti-apartheid movement, which will come later in the story. So this is just the beginning of the story. We can't save them all, can we? 1984. First I hear loud knocking, then a wheezy voice. Mrs. Connolly, Mrs. Connolly. I don't move. Outside the kitchen window, I see the bald head of Mr. Arnaud, our shrunken, mean-spirited neighbor, ready to spew his awful gossip. Poor bait, he hisses whenever he spies a girl in short shorts, a girl in a crop top, or a ninny. Last June, he looked out his bedroom window to see Rachel sunbathing in her plum-colored bikini, soaking up the midday sun, and in minutes he stood at my door, his face lobster red, his mouth twitching. I cannot allow, he blustered, this. Mrs. Connolly. His voice is wobbly, but the knocking has stopped. Though last summer I insisted Rachel sunbathe on the other side of the house, today I'm in no mood to be polite. I sit at my kitchen table with a tepid cup of tea and my old green mug. I don't remember making tea. I don't remember getting up from this chair in the last 2 days except to respond to the call of nature. When I glance at the counter, I see an empty milk carton tilted on its side, its throat yanked open. There are plates full of crumbs littering the table, a glass half full of water, 2 dirty coffee cups. Did I eat yesterday? Today? I don't remember. I remember only the useless calls from Sergeant Burkett at the police station explaining something about shelters in Atlanta and New Orleans and Nashville. Now I keep very still, hoping Mr. Arnaud will vanish into his white 2-story house with its peeling green shelters, its dying asparagus ferns, its Reagan Bush signs that still flag his yard. I wait 10 minutes, then put down my mug and walk to the window, noticing for the first time that it's raining, a steady drizzle, the sky an anxious, blurry gray, like an overwashed sheet. I watch Mr. Arnaud creeping back across his lawn. Sir Lester Deadlock, Rachel calls him, from that witless snob in Bleak House. Mr. Arnaud gets in his old Buick and backs cautiously out of his yard, straight, narrow driveway, careful, and until his right front tire sinks deep into his bed of pansies again. I sigh, but it's a relief to notice other people's mistakes. A relief now that I know where Rachel is, present tense. Just thinking this, I feel a rush of warmth, as if I've discovered a sixth sense, as if I'm linked to my daughter through the tiny hairs on my skin, the cells of my fingernails, or through the waffles and omelets and popovers I made for her throughout the years. Do I really know where my daughter is? What happened is this. 15 minutes ago, I picked up the ringing phone and heard Rachel's voice, raspy and thick with phlegm, as if she had a bad cold. Mom, it's me, she said, as if she were calling from her friend Natalie's house and only wanted me to pick her up, instead of being missing for 2 full days. Honey, I whispered, yanked fully into the present. Oh, Rachel, for God's sake, where are you? And then I started crying, even though I promised myself I wouldn't. I'm okay, Mom. What? Do you just hate me? Are you trying to punish? Mom, I'm in New Orleans. I'm safe. Safe. I thought of Patty Hearst, of kidnapping, violence, death, a gulping silence. I listened through the phone for noises in the background, for horns honking, the loud rustle of crowds, the screech of streetcars, as I waited for Rachel to tell me exactly where she was. Your father and I can be there in 3 hours, I said quickly. You know that. Just give me an address. Mom, I need another day. You need to come home. You can't. I'm hanging up now. Rachel, please. I took a deep breath. I thought I might survive if I could just keep her on the phone. Are you eating breakfast? At least tell me that. Oh, Mother, how silly. No, it's not silly. Breakfast is your foundation. I'm okay, Rachel repeated, and then she cleared her throat. I just need another day here. Rachel? To calm myself, I imagined 2 eggs frying in the skillet the way I like to fix them, the edges crisp and ruffled, the yolks yellow bleeding suns, 2 rounds of Canadian bacon already on her plate, and a slice of fresh papaya. I'm hanging out now, Mother. God damn it, Rachel, at least orange juice. And to my surprise, she laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from her in months. I'll call back in 3 hours. Then the phone went dead, though I kept talking, saying all the things I hadn't been able to say. Rachel, tell me you're all right. Tell me why you left. Tell me where you are. I didn't say I haven't eaten or slept, haven't changed my clothes, or even brushed my teeth in 2 days. Who was there to hear? When I hung up the phone, I knew I should immediately call the police, but I was carried by such a heightened awareness, the kind that says, be still, don't react, that I sat down. Don't be an idiot, Martha, I could hear my husband saying. She's 15, call the damn police. But I didn't. It was as if a younger, happier Rachel was sitting across from me in her nightgown and fuzzy slippers, begging me to wait. Please, she kept saying, it's important. And so I stepped outside of myself for a minute, trusting this feeling, abiding by something I couldn't yet name. That is, until Mr. Arno interrupted, getting between me and the feeling.
Oh, bravo, bravo, bravo. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you.
We're sorry for the difficulties that we had, and we thank you so much. It was an honor to have your story in the Louisville Review.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for including me. I so appreciate it.
Okay, well, we're going to say good night.
Okay, good night. Good night.
Goodbye, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Okay,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
everyone. And bye, Nima.
Bye, Nima.
Bye.
Bye, Patricia.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.